are recording this presentation, so no worries if you are unable to connect in, or if you're calling in and can't see the slides. This will be posted to PHMC's YouTube channel in about a week, and you will receive a link to that in a follow-up email from us. Also, we will be managing any questions through the chat function today. If you don't know where your chat function is, if you have logged in through a computer, in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, there is a circle with what looks like a speech bubble inside of it. If you click that, it will open your conversation window. You can just type your question in there, and I will read your question back to Karen at one of our question breaks. Please keep in mind that because this is being recorded, anything that you do type in the chat box will also be recorded. Everybody is on mute. No worries if you can't figure out how to do that. I can do that from my control panel here today. So I'll be monitoring that as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Karen.
Okay, thanks, Shelby. As I mentioned, the purpose of this webinar is to give a little bit of an overview of the historical marker program and the nomination process, and review some common pitfalls and misunderstandings and examples of what are really good subjects that we're looking for with the marker program, and help you to have a better chance of having a successful nomination. The marker program is administered through the Pennsylvania State Historic Preservation Office. We're the official historic preservation agency for the Commonwealth, and a bureau within the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. The SHPO office administers federal historic preservation programs in PA and state programs authorized by the State History Code, which was enacted in 1988. The Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission, or PHMC, administers a program of historical markers to capture the memory of people, places, events, and innovations that have affected the lives of Pennsylvanians over the centuries since William Penn founded his Commonwealth. The program was established in 1913 and administered by the Pennsylvania Historical Commission. The first markers were typically bronze plaques erected on boulders or stone monuments, and the first plaque was dedicated in 1914. There were approximately 150 plaques erected through the 1930s. Following the creation of the PHMC, which combined the Pennsylvania Historical Commission, the State Archives, and the State Museum in 1945, the PHMC dedicated its first roadside marker in September 1946 for the Hanover Resolves, and there's a historic photo of that on the screen. That is just outside of Harrisburg. The new markers were painted cast aluminum, installed on posts, and placed along streets and highways. The early marker subjects often told stories about Native Americans, towns, paths, and trails, European settlers and settlements, government and politics, and military subjects. As the program evolved, marker topics expanded to stories about athletics, entertainers, artists, civil rights, scientific advancements, industry, and much more. Today, there are close to 2,500 markers and plaques in our database. Of these, there are over 200 that are recorded as missing, including over 20 of the original bronze plaques. We are currently undergoing a marker text evaluation process. Some of the markers have become, we've become aware are somewhat problematic because as historical interpretations have changed and cultural references have evolved, PHMC has become aware that some of the markers of the early years of the program need to be reevaluated and may need to be revised so as not to be insensitive or offensive. So we are undertaking this process now. We've instituted the Commission has instituted a new policy to address these issues, and in the upcoming months, we will be taking some actions on this. And if you would like to hear more about the evaluation process, there's a link on the screen to a blog that talks about how we're going, and we are updating this as the plan continues. Here are just a couple of examples. The marker on the left, the squaw campaign marker, was erected in 1948. The word squaw itself is problematic because it's widely regarded as a derogatory term, and the subject matter sort of celebrates the murder of 2 Native Americans. So that one's especially problematic. The 1949 marker on the right for General Anthony Wayne, while Wayne certainly was a significant historic figure, it describes him as an Indian fighter, which is probably problematic, insensitive terminology that we'll probably look at revising. Okay, so any individual, private organization, local or county government, or public agency can nominate a person, place, event, or innovation of statewide and/or national historical significance. The annual deadline for nominations is December 1st, and all nominations received by that date are considered together in one batch. And each year, about a third of the nominations submitted are approved. We require 12 complete application packets to be submitted via U.S. mail. We had hoped that we had our new computer system upgrade in place for this year, but due to the pandemic, largely that has been delayed. So we're looking at electronic submissions to be accepted and encouraged for the December 1st, 2021 deadline. And after that time, PHMC staff will provide assistance to those who have difficulty with at www.pahistoricalmarkers.com, or I'd be happy to email you an application. Just send me an email and I will include an attachment or link to the nomination form for you via email. And just a reminder that submissions must be postmarked by December 1st to be considered for the cycle for 2021 approvals. The Staff Marker Committee and staff members with expertise in the subject, as well as a 5-member independent panel of historians from throughout the state and a commissioner who chairs the panel, provide evaluations during the period of December through early February. We make an effort to have a panel that is diverse in race, gender, institutional affiliation, region, and area of expertise. Nominations are evaluated on their individual merit, whether they meet the approval criteria. Criteria for evaluations and guidelines are available with the forms. And the commission votes on the panel's recommendations following their meeting, and that's usually in March. So notifications usually are sent to all nominators in March following the December 1st deadline. There are 11 criteria for approval. Some of the most important ones are that the nomination is clear and organized, and the facts claimed are documented and verified. The subject has significant impact on its times and has statewide and or national historical significance. The subject has a substantial connection to Pennsylvania, and places of worship and cemeteries or burial grounds are generally not approved unless they were the first of a denomination or a first of a burial place type. There are many historic churches throughout and cemeteries throughout the state and nation, and obviously we can't mark them all. Nominators must be prepared, if approved, to bear costs associated with manufacture, installation, and dedication. For your information, city-type markers cost approximately $16.60, and roadside markers cost approximately $21.10, so $1,665 or $2,110. And the difference is really basically size, and of course the amount of verbiage that the marker will accommodate. Final figures may vary slightly, and there are usually other costs incurred related to installation and dedication. Some individuals cover the costs themselves, others accept donations toward a marker project. Some sponsors are organizations or institutions related to the marker subject, or a county or local historical society or local governments. After dedication, PHMC assumes ownership of the markers and oversees long-term maintenance of all official state markers. And the photos that you see in the slide, the one on the right is our current maintenance contractor with some of his custom-made equipment that he uses to go out and pull markers from their locations, take them back to his shop, which shows on the left-hand slide, and fully refurbish the markers before returning them to their original location. It is expected that markers are dedicated within a year of their approval, but there are exceptions. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, all state-affiliated public events were put on hold. So we had markers scheduled in the spring and summer that had to be postponed. And because of the uncertainty of the time, most dedications will be put off until 2021. It's important to be in communication with the marker program coordinator about dedication planning. Coordinators work with local organizers to develop a text, arrange for manufacture, and coordinate installation. Local organizers generally plan an unveiling and dedication ceremony for each new marker. Most markers are dedicated in public events featuring public officials, local historians, community representatives, and others. A PHMC representative usually attends to say a few words on behalf of the Commission. Each dedication presents opportunities for Pennsylvanians and visitors to Pennsylvania to celebrate and understand their heritage. PHMC has an agency-wide initiative of diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. We're committed to covering the costs of underrepresented subjects and counties in the state. African American, LGBTQ, and women's history outside of Philadelphia. I say outside of Philadelphia because those subjects are fairly well represented in those in Philadelphia. Hispanic, Latino, Asian, and Pacific Islander. Counties with less than 15 markers, many of those are in the northern tier or in rural counties, and you can look them up in the on the marker website. So we encourage you to nominate little-known subjects to bring greater awareness and highlight varied perspectives. As I said, you can do a county search on the database to see how well a subject is covered or how many markers are in a county. Philadelphia, which has over 300 markers, has the most by far of all counties. It's double the amount of Allegheny County, which is the second most in a county, because of its rich heritage. But it's always good to spread the markers around the state, and it's gratifying to highlight subjects that educate people about significant subjects in their communities and state that they didn't know about before. These markers that are included within this initiative still must meet the established criteria. And some examples of some of those that we have undertaken in the last year are in the next slide. Last year, PHMC funded 2 under this initiative. Pandanarium was an early pre-African American community in Mercer County, which has been studied in several archaeological investigations. And the left 2 slides show the dedication ceremony that was held in a nearby church, and the bottom one is the site of the former community. And on the right is the dedication ceremony for the Cynthia Catlin Miller marker, which is who was a Warren County widow who founded and led several abolitionist organizations, opened her home to freedom seekers on the Underground Railroad, and hosted Frederick Douglass, the great abolitionist hero, leader, and other abolitionists in her home during the Sugar Grove Convention, which was a very significant abolitionist event. And the PHMC Executive Office has committed to funding several more this upcoming cycle, including the Berwyn School Fight marker, which was a protest against segregation of schools in Chester County in the 1940s. And that dedication actually, I think, may be the only one that will be held this year. They are scheduling a dedication at the AME Church that was the primary meeting place for that protest in November. Okay, and here we are at a question break. So we will take a look at the chat and see what questions we have.
Thanks, Karen. I am going to read out some questions now that we got. We tracked down the source of that echo, which happens to be my headset. So Karen and I are doing a little bit of a dance here to get to the speaker. So please be patient with us. So we did get a few questions. The first one is, Karen, my township has 2 missing markers. What should we do in the township with the state?
As I had mentioned before, we have between 200 and 300 missing markers throughout the state. So we really don't have, PHMC doesn't really have funding for replacement of missing markers. Sometimes there are organizations or local governments that are interested in replacing their markers, which you're certainly welcome to do, but we cannot fund the replacement of missing markers at this time. My contact information will be at the end of this webinar, So if you'd like to contact me, if you do have a funding source and would like to talk to me about replacement of missing markers, I would be happy to discuss that with you via email in the upcoming weeks.
Great, thank you, Karen. Our next question, and just a quick reminder, if you have a question, type it in the chat box. We will have another question break, so don't worry about trying to get all your questions in now. I know there are different kinds of markers like roadside. How is it determined which kind of marker is most appropriate for a subject?
Really, it's just basically size and word content that is the difference. Also, there's obviously somewhat of a cost difference. But generally speaking, the roadside markers are more appropriate for rural locations or community park or in a wide grassy area, where in a smaller community, whereas the city type markers really are just that, are more appropriate for narrow sidewalks, usually within large urban areas, but even smaller urban areas, it's just a matter of placement of a marker that will be less vulnerable to being hit by a vehicle primarily.
Okay, next question. In addition to maintenance, does the state also cover liability?
I'm not sure what that exactly means, but if a marker is damaged or destroyed and a police report has been submitted, I generally can obtain the police report, which includes information about the perpetrator's insurance, and file an insurance claim, and I've been able to do that fairly successfully. Without that information, the state is self-insured with a theft policy or damage policy with a $5,000 deductible. So obviously, it's above the cost of the marker. So it's key that if somebody notices a marker was damaged, that they contact me right away so that I can obtain that police report and file a claim to have a replacement fabricated.
All right, we did have a question come in about where someone can find the database of existing markers. If you look, for those of you who are online, if you look in the chat box, Scott Doyle did provide a link for you to be able to find that. If you're not online or not able to open that link, if you go to the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission webpage and scroll down from the top a little bit, you'll see an icon that says marker search, and you can use that. We did have another question come in here. If a marker is being rewritten for insensitive wording noticed by your commission, who is responsible for that cost?
At this point, we are still working on this policy, but it is my understanding that any markers that are deemed need to be replaced because of insensitive verbiage, the cost will be borne by the commission.
All right, we had one more question come in that we'll take during this question break, and then we'll move on. And like I said, we will have another question break in a little bit. The question is, do you hold dedication ceremonies for every new marker? If not, how do you decide where to hold a dedication ceremony, and who covers the cost?
For, I would say, 99% of markers, of new markers that are approved each year, a dedication ceremony is held, and the nominator will get together with community leaders, or if it's an organization, They will plan the dedication ceremony and be responsible for the costs involved with that dedication. As I said, at this point, dedications have been put off, but I do anticipate that even the ones that have had to be delayed will be rescheduled in the new year. So it is expected that all new markers are dedicated in a public ceremony. All right, I guess we'll start moving on with some more information about nominations themselves. There are some common pitfalls for applications, and the biggest one, well, here are some of the biggest ones. Adequate documentation is not provided. Photocopied excerpts from several primary and secondary scholarly sources are required. While news articles can serve as documentation, especially those contemporary to the marker subject, they should not be relied upon solely. Journal articles and histories or biographies of the subject are good sources. Letters of support from historians with expertise in the subject matter can be very persuasive, although those from political figures are not particularly so. The subject's significance does not rise to the level of statewide or national significance. Every year we receive nominations for subjects that have historical significance, but just not on the broader statewide or national level. So a nominator must carefully consider how far the potential subject's impact reached. And certainly I can be reached for questions about that. Another pitfall is that the Pennsylvania connection is not sufficient. Many nominations are submitted for individuals who were born in Pennsylvania but moved elsewhere in childhood, or who made a single achievement in Pennsylvania. And while this can be a bit of a gray area, the nomination must make the case that the individual got his or her start in Pennsylvania or was shaped here, and the time here had an impact on the person's life, career, or achievement. If a single achievement in PA can be clarified, it may be better to have the marker title be that single achievement or work. For instance, there was a very important study done by Crystal Eastman in Pittsburgh, and she was a New Yorker. So the marker nomination was sent in with her name as the title, but while a marker was approved, there was a contingency that the title be the name of the study, Work Accidents and the Law. Another example, there was a children's book written in Erie, PA, about the syrup-making industry there, and it won a Newbery Award. But the woman who wrote it was temporarily in Pennsylvania. So the title of the marker is Miracles on Maple Hill, and the author, of course, is mentioned in the text. Another example is the Salk polio vaccine. The marker is entitled for the innovation, not the individual who produced it, although his name is obviously in part of the marker. Another issue might be that the subject is not unique. There are numerous similar subjects that exist throughout the state or nation, and there's a few examples that follow in the next slide. Military heroes and political figures that served in state and or federal offices may not be good candidates for a marker. All people who served in our military deserve respect and recognition. but the PHMC marker program is generally not the appropriate method. We couldn't possibly mark all of them. Even the first to be killed or the longest serving in a post would generally not be approved for a PHMC marker. Those that do have markers are generally military leaders whose strategies or military techniques made a significant impact on a particular battle or war. Also, while all Pennsylvania governors and U.S. presidents from Pennsylvania are automatically approved for a marker upon submission of a complete nomination, other political figures could not possibly be covered by the marker program. Approvals are generally only possible if the person was the sole author or sponsor of a landmark legislation that impacted the entire state or nation, and or was a model for subsequent legislation in other states or the nation. National Register properties are not necessarily guaranteed a marker. The Historical Marker Program is administered solely by PHMC's SHPO office, a state agency, but the National Register Program is a federal program of the National Park Service that's administered by colleagues of mine in the SHPO office, but the application forms and the approval criteria are very different. The marker program is primarily focused on the history of what happened or who lived at a particular site. It is usually not associated with a structure per se, but tells a brief story about the subject associated with a location. The National Register program focuses on the built environment, so it requires that the building be extant. It also recognizes properties that are significant on the local level, which the marker program does not do. National Historic Landmarks often are approved for PHMC markers. For example, the Lemoyne House in Washington County, Kennywood Amusement Park in Allegheny County, and Honey Hollow Watershed in Bucks County. Other times, markers are approved for significant figures who built, lived, and or worked in National Historic Landmarks. For instance, Wharton Esherick is marked at his National Historic Landmark studio, Pearl S. Buck at her home, and Henry O. Tanner at his home. Being the oldest in existence does not automatically make the subject significant. If the subject was also the first of a type, for example, the first church of a particular religious denomination, the first facility to produce a product, or the first chapter of a significant group, it would have a decent chance of approval if other criteria are met. Related to this, subjects that are too qualified or very difficult to verify are often not approved. For example, the first post-secondary institution in PA chartered by the state to award Associate of Art and Associate of Science degrees. That actually was the hook that somebody had sent in for an institution, and as you can see, it's just too qualified. Or an additional one was the world's first town lit exclusively with electric lights. Okay, to increase chances for approval, read and understand the approval criteria and guidelines provided with the nomination form. While this seems obvious, it is clear from some of the nominations received that many don't do this. It could save you a lot of time and effort if you really spend some time to go over these and make sure that your subject meets the criteria. While there are a number of subjects that could go either way, and improvements and resubmissions could result in a subsequent success, there are also many nominations that we review each year that just will never reach the level of significance that we are looking for a PHMC marker. So if you have questions about this, please contact me, and I will often be able to quickly tell you whether you have a good chance of approval or not, and if not, I can contact some colleagues and have a discussion about it and advise you about that. Focus your nomination on the subject's broad significance. They must have impact. The subject must have impact on the entire state or nation. And consider preparing a draft nomination for staff review to get feedback prior to submitting a final nomination. This could be a big time saver. Preparing a draft takes some time and research, but it's generally not as much time as a full submission. You can call or email me, and we can talk about your idea for a marker topic. And again, you're welcome to submit a draft. You don't need to submit all your documentation. So often it's helpful if you give an idea of what kind of sources you do have available to you. But really, primarily, it's the narrative portion of the nomination, which I think is number 2, that's the critical factor for review. And we'd be happy to do that if you send that in to me by November 1st. That allows us time to review it, make some comments, and get back to you in time for you to make any adjustments before the December 1st deadline. And here are some examples of some of my favorite markers, which I think really meet the mission of the program. The one on the left is in Erie, PA. It's for Paul Almond-Seiple, who was an important Antarctic explorer. And I know you see during the winter time on the news information on the weather report about the wind chill factor. Well, that wind chill index was devised by Mr. Seiple. So I think that's a really great marker that just about everybody can relate to. Also, Stephanie Kwolek, who's a female chemist, worked for DuPont Corporation, was born and raised in Westmoreland County, a small town in Westmoreland County, and she, while working for DuPont, developed Kevlar, which most of you probably know is a fiber, a very, very strong fiber that is used in protective gear for primarily law enforcement and the military. Here are some very important places. The Bethlehem Steel Plant in Northampton County was one of the largest steel producers in the nation and the world, and were very influential during the wars and supplying ships and other steel things for the war effort. And Falling Water is a National Historic Landmark in Fayette County, and it was designed and built by Frank Lloyd Wright, and it's a very, very unique piece of architecture, which is built into the landscape. And here are some good examples of events that have been marked. The Rhodes Opera House fire on the left, that's in Berks County. While disasters are often not approved because they're seen as sensational or celebrating tragedy, this event was marked because it directly led to legislation and changes in regulations that have made theaters across the nation safer. Also, the U.S. Sanitary Commission Great Central Fair in Philadelphia was held as part of a national effort to raise funds for the Union Army during the Civil War. And it happened to have been President Lincoln's only official public appearance in Philadelphia. Here are some examples of innovation. The Stewart Tank in Columbia County. This is a war equipment, obviously, that saw action in World War II and emphasizes innovation, labor, and the home front war effort, and identifies the plant where it was manufactured as the nation's largest producer of armor plate. And the banana split marker on the right is in Westmoreland County. And it's sort of an aspect of popular culture, which is some subject matter that's not necessarily well represented by the marker program. And while it's a lighthearted, fun subject, it lent itself to a dedication that included the entire community, and it was in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and Arnold Palmer, before he passed away, was a featured guest. He also is from Latrobe, so it really was a great event that promoted the marker program. And even though it's a light-hearted subject and more recent, it certainly is. The nominator certainly did document the fact that the banana split was developed first in Latrobe, PA. A caution about pop culture subjects is that because many of them are fairly recent, they may not be fully understood, and it might be difficult to obtain scholarly documentation. So some key things to keep in mind. First, review the approval criteria and nomination guidelines. And if you're not sure or need clarification, consult marker staff. While staff have no vote, they generally have a feel for what nominations have a good chance for approval. Everyone is welcome to submit a nomination, whatever the subject. However, staff will be candid about whether subjects are unlikely to be approved to try to save nominators time and aggravation. Also, if we advise you that we think there's not a great chance of approval, consider erecting your own local markers. Here are some examples on the slide. The one on the right is more similar to our type of design marker, but also the one on the left can be very effective because they can include images, graphic images and photographs that can provide additional interpretation about the subject. The only prohibitions about local markers are that they use different color scheme than the state's dark blue with gold lettering to distinguish them, and to avoid trademark issues, and that they not use the state coat of arms and keystone and bars design elements. It is recommended that local markers have the name of the individual or organization responsible for erecting them on the markers, so the appropriate parties can be notified if the marker is damaged or requires maintenance or relocation. Okay, we're second question break.
All right, thank you, Karen. First question, do markers ever get revoked for any reason once erected?
This is part of the evaluation process we're working on now. It's anticipated that some markers may need to be retired in this process, but that has yet to be determined. And with the policy that was recently approved by the Commission, any retirement would have to be brought before the Commission and approved by a 2/3 majority.
Okay. Next question. In addition to the information available on the database, are the full applications for markers available to the public, both approved and not approved applications?
Yes, they are. All approved, I retain files of all approved markers, so every marker has its own file in our office. So also, scans of those files have been done and will be available online when our new computer system is in effect next year. But if you make an inquiry to me now, I certainly am able to provide that information to you. For nominations that are not approved, I only retain those files for 5 years, and then they are discarded. But up until that point, they are public record, and I certainly could provide them upon request.
All right, next question. Can we obtain a marker for a facility that is still in operation?
Yes, that is something that could be approved, but it's the history of the building or company in the building that is important to recognize. Not necessarily its widespread nature, but if it is a company that has a special innovation that is associated with it, that would be particularly important to emphasize in your nomination.
Okay, this question. Which state was the first to start a historical marker program? Do you know?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I'm pretty sure that there were others prior to Pennsylvania. So the first state marker program here was the first marker, which was a bronze plaque, was erected in 1914. I think there were some others prior to that, but probably not many. Currently, many states have state historical marker programs, and sometimes they are administered, like us, by the SHPO office. Other times, the State Historical Society, sometimes their transportation department is involved. So it varies from state to state.
All right, the next question. Is it possible to be on the Federal Register?
If you mean, is it possible for a marker subject to be on the National Register? Yes, and many are. As I had described, some of those National Historic Landmarks obviously have national historical significance. But just because a subject is on the National Register, it does not necessarily qualify for a PHMC marker because it must have statewide and or national historical significance, whereas many National Register properties are significant on the local level.
Okay. Do you limit the number of approvals in a single year?
We do not. Markers are evaluated on their own merit, and if they meet the panel and the commission feel that they meet the criteria, they are approved. And as I said, since the nominator and or sponsoring organization is responsible for the costs of fabrication, that doesn't really figure into the to what we're looking at for approval. Certainly there are long-term costs, but each nomination is considered on its own merit.
All right. Does the PHMC have a marker of its own?
There's no marker for the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. There is, however, a marker for the Pennsylvania State Museum and the Pennsylvania State Archives, in addition to a number of our historic sites throughout the state.
All right, we have one more question. We have two more questions. So we'll do these two questions, and then we will jump into the last part of our presentation since we're getting close to time. We did start a few minutes late, so if you can hang on with us until we're finished, it should not be too much longer. All right, next question. Since most, if not all, of this year's markers couldn't be dedicated due to COVID, will that have an impact on next year's applications? Seems like the dedication calendar might get kind of crowded with 2 years' worth of ceremonies.
That is true. However, it only impacts PHMC in that we might not be able to have a PHMC representative at each of the dedication events in 2021, which is unfortunate because it really is nice for community to see that the commission really supports the marker program and see a commissioner who usually is the representative come out and speak with the community. But other than that, as I said, the money is not a factor because the local sponsor covers the costs. And as far as scheduling is concerned, it's just a matter of, I can order a marker at any time. I might need a little more lead time with the manufacturer, but that shouldn't cause a problem as far as dedications for next year.
All right, the last question that we're going to take for right now. What can you say about the people who serve on the review and approval panel, their backgrounds, their current positions, etc.?
Well, the panel currently has a membership of 5, and we choose members, historians from throughout the state. So we generally have northeastern, southeastern, central, southwestern, northwestern regions. And then we try to vary them by areas of expertise. We like to have a racially diverse panel, gender diverse. We'd like to have a panel that has some members from educational institutions and others who are from historical organizations or museums. So I think that answers your question about that. Okay, so I think we'll move on now to the sort of wrap up. This is the information. For any information about markers, you can, of course, contact me, but you can go yourself to our marker webpage, which is www.pahistoricalmarkers.com. So it's pretty easy to remember. If you go to that site and you scroll down, there are 6 blue boxes where you can access information on the history of the marker program, a calendar of dedication events, marker nomination forms and information about submitting nominations, a searchable database of all markers, all PHMC markers, additional resources, and lists of markers approved in recent years. Okay, and now I think Shelby can take over and talk a little bit about some of our Bureau-wide initiatives.
Thanks, Karen. I'm just going to take a quick minute, and I'm not going to go through all of these slides, so I can get to the end and leave Karen's contact information up on the screen for you. But I did want to let you know that we are going to be instituting a new system that we call PA Share at the end of January. This is a new technology and an online database management system that's going to be replacing our current CRGIS. For this marker application, you still will be using the old-fashioned way through snail mail that Karen had discussed earlier in the presentation. But next year, you will be asked to use this PA Share system. So like I said, I'm not going to go into this too much. If you Google PA Share, as you see it spelled on the screen, you can see lots of information that we have available on our blog and on our website. So I'm going to click through these quickly. I just talked about that there. The link here at the bottom, pahistoricpreservation.com/countdown-to-share, will give you some additional information, and we're always happy to answer any questions you have. Another slide, just to let you know, there's lots of different ways to stay in touch with us, to find out about changes to any of our programs, to receive our general newsletter. We do publish a weekly blog that has lots of timely information and lots of interesting topics, often about the marker program. And by visiting pahistoricpreservation.com, you can sign up for some of these newsletters. This information will be also included in your follow-up email for today's webinar. And there you are. There is Karen's contact information, her email, kgalle@pa.gov, and her telephone, 717-705-4266. So thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar, and have a great day.